Hey, what's up, guys? It's Rico here, CEO of Source Plan Asia, host of the Made in China podcast, host of the NWO podcast. What else is there? There's the Discord and the Source Plan Asia YouTube channel. So you're probably seeing this on YouTube or any podcast platform that you listen to. And I am joined by my esteemed host, Gary Huang. And basically, I got introduced to him through Michael Michelini, and just to talk to him about his event that's coming up in the next 2 weeks. Actually, by the time this podcast is out, I would say like the next week and a half, something like that. And yeah, Gary, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much for having me on, Rico. Greetings from Tokyo, and very excited to be here. As Rico mentioned, I am organizing the first ever e-commerce conference for Amazon sellers in Japan, April 4th to the 5th. And I've been selling online on Amazon for a number of years. I also have a sourcing background. I used to live in Shanghai for 11 years from 2008 to 2019. So my background is sort of like the intersection between e-commerce and supply chain. I'm from the States originally, from LA, born and raised, as you can see from my hat. And yeah, currently in Japan for about 2.5 years so far with my family.
Nice. Yep. When you say your family, you mean like wife and kids?
Yeah, so with my wife and my 4-year-old son. So yeah, we just moved to Tokyo like 2 months ago, so we're adjusting over here.
Nice. Well, just if you don't mind me asking, why Japan and why Tokyo?
Why Japan? I think ever since I was a kid, I've always been fascinated with like Nintendo. And, when I was a kid, like my mom just left me with like this origami book, like instead of hiring a babysitter. So I was like just looking at the pictures and figuring out like how to make a paper crane and stuff. And, like all the coolest video games were from Japan, like, from Nintendo. So I've always had a fascination ever since I was a kid with Japan. The culture, the food, and yeah, and living in Shanghai before for over 10 years. I mean, it was a short flight from Shanghai to Tokyo. My wife and I, she's from Shanghai. We've always, came here for the food and, for like, the hot springs, all that stuff. So it's always been kind of a dream for us to at least spend part of the year in Shanghai. But, maybe we can talk about what happened during COVID. So I guess our dream came true. So we're currently living in Japan now.
Nice. So many questions. We're gonna try to keep the podcast brief. You're busy, I'm busy as well, and then of course we need to edit it as quick as possible. But I do have two questions. What initially brought you to Shanghai? And the second question would be, the first question would be, have you ever watched a documentary called Jiri Dreams of Sushi?
Yes, of course.
Any chance that you've been to the restaurant yet?
I don't even know if,
bucket list.
I mean, unless you're like, you have an inside connection, I don't know if it's even possible to get a table there anywhere, anytime. Yeah, I mean, I heard that one of his sons branched out to open
he opened a second restaurant.
Yeah, so maybe that could be a possibility. But to be honest, there's so much good sushi. There's so many good sashimi places. I mean, I don't even know, what to choose, to get started. But yeah, I have seen that. It's just like, the example of the Japanese dedication to the details, to the craft. Someone like Jiri just spending his whole life dedicated to just learning how to like slice fish, right? And prepare fish. Exactly. I think Yeah.
I learned so much from that documentary, just because like first time I had sushi was in Toronto, and then you just kind of learn from how other people are eating and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And then in the documentary, he was saying that he doesn't like it when people dip the sushi in soy sauce. Already puts a little bit of soy sauce inside the roll
Mm.
or
Yeah.
all that stuff. He's like, you're not supposed
Yeah.
to do it like that. Like
Yeah.
just eat the
Yeah.
sushi the way it is.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
he kicks out people from his restaurant. I was like,
Yeah.
okay. So
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
but I think in terms of if you do want to go to that restaurant, like my understanding is that you have to either book it through like an agent or through like a five-star hotel. Like, hmm,
Yeah, yeah,
so
like what I said, unless you have some sort of inside connection, right?
yeah,
Whether agent or you're staying at the Grand Hyatt,
yeah,
it would be very difficult. And many of those popular restaurants, they're like they're like that. And I mean, Tokyo is probably one of the greatest cities in the world for restaurants. I mean,
mhm,
all kinds of cuisine. There's like I think more Michelin star restaurants here than anywhere in the world. So yeah, it's really amazing. That's like one of the big reasons. And but at the same time, you don't have to go high end. You can just go to like a local ramen place, for like $10, and that ramen's probably gonna, if it were in like I don't know in Shanghai, it would probably be the number one ramen restaurant in town. But here it's just
yeah,
like one of like a million places. So it's like a ridiculous amount of selection if you're into food over here.
nice. So let's start at the beginning. We talked yesterday for the first time. You told me you're a second generation Chinese American. Uh,
Yes. Yeah.
and then so then it's interesting that what I wanted to talk to you about is your story, or at least a brief history of your family, and
Yeah.
then the idea of you going back to China, uh
Yeah.
even though you were born in the States and everything. So
Yeah.
what was that like in the sense of how Chinese people view you, how the business was for you, and all those kind of things. Like, I always
Yeah.
find it very fascinating.
Yeah. Rico, that question could be a whole entire podcast by itself. So I'll try to,
We should probably
yeah,
schedule a second podcast
yeah,
about
yeah,
moving
but
to China specifically.
yeah, I'll give you like the quick like 80-20 rule summary of that. My family is from mainland China, from Beijing
Mhm.
originally. So my mom and my grandma moved from Beijing to LA in the late 70s. They were very early because at that time, very few mainlanders were able to make it to the US. We had some family that had studied in the US at universities, so they were able to, through their connections, allow them to come. Yeah, so my dad was still working in Beijing at the time. So long story short, my mom and my grandma went to the US first, and I was in my mom's stomach. So my mom was pregnant with me. She didn't know it at the time.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, they didn't necessarily decide or plan to stay in the US, but because she was pregnant, later she found out, and then it was already kind of late in the pregnancy. So obviously, like she did, she didn't want to risk the long haul flight. So I was
Mhm.
born in the US, and kind of the rest is history, right? Because if you're, I was born and I'm American by birth, so they were able to stay, and then my dad came over later. Yeah, so that's kind of my family background. I speak Mandarin Chinese. I was very fortunate to have a. Have you heard of Tiger Mom before, Rico?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So my mom was just too busy with her business to be a tiger mom. So I had tiger grandma. And my grandma was like super tough on me. Like after school, she would force me to study Chinese. Like we only spoke Mandarin Chinese at home in LA. So that's how I picked up the fundamentals of my Mandarin. So I'm very thankful now, for that. But at that time, it was a pain in the butt. I mean, I had to do extra homework, the Chinese,
I learned
yeah.
about the Tiger Mom concept through this TV show called Fresh Off the Boat.
Push off the boat. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's
It's kind of like,
one of
yeah.
my favorite
I mean,
shows.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's very prevalent in Asian culture. Like, like if you get a B or a B plus, they're like, why didn't you get? And it's not. But anyways, yeah, that's how I picked up my Chinese. Well, I grew up in the States. And why did I go to Shanghai? I did study abroad when I was in university. I went to Peking University. I
Mhm.
did 2 semesters there. I guess I kind of rebelled against my family because they wanted me to be like pre-med, become a doctor, and it just wasn't my thing. And then I just discovered I had this gift for Chinese. When I went to China, like everything sounded very familiar because at that time, growing up in the States, I'm kind of dating myself. I think I'm a little older. It was the 80s, and there weren't many like Mandarin Chinese speakers. Everyone was speaking Cantonese. Everyone immigrated from like Guangzhou a
Well,
lot earlier, right? Yeah.
you look very very young, so you're
Thank
doing
you.
you're
Thank
doing
you. It's
something
because
right.
maybe it's the genes, maybe it's because I got a hat on. So yeah. But yeah, man. So I never really discovered like my Chinese like gift until I went to Beijing for the first time after high school. And then I saw like, wow, I can converse with this whole group of people. It sounds kind of familiar because that's how we talked at home. So it really
Mhm.
kind of like opened the door for me. And then I also did a summer internship in Shanghai, also during my college days. This was a long time ago. I was just, we had like two other guys from my university that did a summer internship in Shanghai. And basically, I don't want to say like the job was just like, it wasn't hard, but we had a lot of time a taste of the live culture and karaoke and all that good stuff. And I kind of like was just blown away by Shanghai, and yeah, it's just like the lifestyle. It was amazing. So I really wanted to pursue that. So that kind of sparked the curiosity or all like the passion to want to go to Shanghai. So I didn't go to Shanghai directly outside of after college because we had some issues at home, family issues, and then I actually I worked at Google as a contractor, like very early on in their pre-IPO days. This is 2004. So I was working in their online advertising, their AdWords division. So back then, AdWords was very early, like in its infancy. So that was like my first exposure into e-commerce indirectly because I saw like all these companies were running ads for like, poker, like health supplements, like sex toys, like a ton of porn and all that stuff. And I'm like, there's got to be something here, right? They're running so many ads. I mean, they got to be
Yeah.
making some money, right? So long story short, I didn't get the gig at Google. That was like my first big failure. I only got a contract job for like a couple months, but I took away from that experience. I started selling online on eBay, like in 2005. That was my first experience doing an e-commerce brand. If you want to ask me, Gary, what was
Very,
the first?
very similar to my business partner, China Mike. We call him China Mike. He's from the States, from Chicago. But so he was doing the same thing. He was selling stuff on eBay
Yeah,
back in the
yeah,
day.
yeah. I mean, this was 2005. eBay was the number one e-commerce platform. It's like Amazon FBA right now, but this is like almost 20 years ago. And then, yeah, that's how I got started. I also did, arbitrage. I would go to like estate sales, like Saturday morning. I would, hit up Craigslist. I would go to all of the rich neighborhoods like Brentwood, Beverly Hills, the estate sales. Get like buy their really expensive clothes, stuff like that, and I'll flip it on eBay. Yeah, so that's how I first got started in the whole e-commerce game. Fast forward to 2008, that's when the first financial crisis hit, and then Beijing Olympics, as you guys remember, everybody was talking about China. I'm like, I know that I was there. I really want to make a move, so I decided to make a move to Shanghai. Summer of 2008, I remember it was July 5th. It was like right before the August Beijing Olympics, and I had one really good friend in Shanghai. He let me crash on his couch for, and I didn't have a job in hand, but fortunately, I was able to find a job in sourcing. So that's kind of the second chapter. That's how I stumbled upon sourcing, and that's how I made it to Shanghai in 2008.
Nice. So yeah, going further into it, it's like, so what was it like in China as a Chinese person coming?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
what was your lifestyle like?
Yeah, so it's kind of a joke. I'm a foreigner everywhere. Like, no
Yeah.
matter where I go, I'm a foreigner. Even in my hometown in LA, I just remember, talking to someone like I just met. They're like, after a while, they're like, oh, where are you from? And I would say, I'm from LA. And they're like, they look at you funny. They're like, no, I mean, where are you really from? I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, my parents are from China, right? If you really want to know, I mean, that's what you mean, right? And they're like, other people say, oh, why is your English is really good. I'm like, thank you. I was born here, right? I mean, so even though, born and raised in LA, I'm always a foreigner. But when I went to China, I'm like, hey, I speak Chinese, maybe I can blend in 100%, but not exactly because
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not like 100%, perfect, but if I'm in Shanghai, people, they're able to communicate with me fine, but they don't think I'm like a Westerner, or they think I'm like a Northerner, right? But if I'm in like Beijing, they think, oh, this guy's like, he's from the South, like Nanpang. Like there's always
Mm.
something a little bit off, right? So
Yeah,
that's the joke.
yeah.
Like wherever I go, I'm like perpetual foreigner, but I'm fine with that.
I have a
Yeah, yeah,
similar situation because like
yeah,
I was born in Zambia, but I moved to the States
yeah,
when I was 10, and then
mm,
I moved to Canada after that.
yeah,
So like my accent, like people can't place me like
mm,
where the accent is from. Like
yeah,
Canadians can, but like
yeah.
when I go to
Do you
like
say a boot? Do you say a boot?
no, that's a more Western Canadian thing
Yeah, okay.
than a Toronto thing. But the
Yeah,
one
okay.
difference is like people say like people that are not from Canada say Toronto, right?
Yeah,
And then Canadians say Toronto. It's one of those things that you just pick up on, like when you're talking to somebody says Toronto, you're like, oh, okay, this person is probably Canadian. But
yeah,
yeah, like when I go to Zambia, sometimes it's like people see me. When they see me, they think
yeah,
they know that I'm Zambian, or they assume that I'm Zambian. And then when I start speaking, they're like, oh, where are you from?
yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
like, so it's always like this weird thing, like where I'm
yeah,
like always having to explain, like, yeah, so I was born here, but then I
yeah,
moved here, and then like,
yeah,
oh, you know what I mean? Is always a
yeah,
weird situation for me. So I
yeah,
completely can relate to that situation.
yeah, yeah. It's yeah, and I wonder with my son because my son, he's 4. He was born in Shanghai. We're living in Japan now, and we're bilingual, right? We speak. My wife speaks to him in Mandarin. I speak to him in English, and he's learning Japanese in school. And we also lived in Thailand for a couple months, so he actually learned a
Mm.
little bit of Thai back when he was in like Thai preschool. So I wonder if where he'll associate himself with
I
when he
think
gets older. So
I
yeah,
think you would connect with my business partner heavy because like there's so many similarities in
really.
terms, yeah, your life
Yeah,
story.
I'd love to connect offline. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
Let me know.
I'll make an introduction. Anyways, you move to Shanghai, you start the business, or you start working in the sourcing company.
I
Um,
started working. I hadn't started my own business yet. I worked for that company for about 8 years
yeah.
and learned a lot. I visited, hundreds of factories all over China, seeing the good, the bad, the ugly, from like
Mm,
state of the art, fancy like, battery factories like BYD to like the really kind of gritty, you know what I mean, like the backyard type operations in like Dongbei, the northeast of China, and there's just like exhaust fumes in the warehouse, and there's like they're
mm,
not even wearing masks and stuff
mm.
like that. It's really sad, but I mean, I really seen a lot when it comes to the China sourcing side, and learned a lot as well. And if you want to ask about like how they perceive me, I mean that's kind of interesting as well. And I went to like a lot of trade shows, all across China, Hong Kong, etc. Yeah, just helping my foreign clients. So I was basically like kind of like the bridge. So at that time, my clients, our agency was very small, a consulting firm. The boss was Brazilian Chinese. He's Brazilian. He's older. He was born in Sao Paulo, Brazil, but he lived in Shanghai for like decade. He's like, oh, China hand, and then like the clients were all Brazilian.
Mm.
So I was like the bridge between the two. I ended up learning Portuguese just on my own because like I visited Brazil several times, and I kind of was like, I really enjoy like the culture there, the food, and it's like their culture is a little different from the rest of Latin America because it's like, I don't know, I just think like they're cooler than the other Latin Americans. But anyways, if you want to talk about that as well. But yeah, that was like my role at the company. I was like the bridge in between, and sometimes I was like translating between like Mandarin, Chinese, and Portuguese.
Mm.
Yeah, so it was really interesting.
Sounds
Yeah.
complicated.
Yeah,
Sounds really
and
complicated.
yeah, I mean, there's some similarities, but there's some differences as well. But yeah, that was chapter 2.
Nice. So, how did you go from what you were doing then to what you're doing now?
Mm.
How did that happen?
Yeah, so there was like at least 2 steps. I was working for that company for like almost like about 8 years, right? So after a while, I kind of hit a ceiling, and the Brazilian economy started to stagnate. And then I just remembered I was in my apartment. I would listen to podcasts, right? I would listen to English podcasts, like back in the day. We had like the OGs of FBA, like Scott Volker, the Amazing Seller. I don't know if you
Yeah,
guys remember him.
yeah,
And I would hear that. I'm like, hey, I know this stuff, right? I did eBay before, and then I'm here in Shanghai. I can just hop on the high speed rail. I can go to Yiwu. I can go to Zhejiang, Jiangsu to visit the factories. So I just put 2 and 2 together, and then I had one of my business partners at that time. We worked together to create a brand selling on Amazon in 2016. So that's how I got into Amazon FBA. I mean, it wasn't a big jump because when I was selling on eBay at that time from 05 to 08, I actually started selling on Amazon as well, but there wasn't FBA yet. It was, self-fulfillment. So I had a little foray into Amazon, very early, but FBA, I started about 2016.
I feel like that was around the time when there was a big jump in FBA because
Yeah.
like even Amazing Seller podcast, like you mentioned, and then those around the time when I had the big jump of FBA clients as well.
Yeah.
And,
Are you selling on FBA, Rico?
no, I mean we've
Okay.
ventured a few times, but
Yeah.
nothing kind of hit because we were so
Okay.
focused on the growing of the actual sourcing company. Like
Yeah.
I wanted to do that early on, but then one of my mentors at the time told me to
Yeah.
just kind of focus on like growing the sourcing business, which I think was a good idea anyways, because I think I would have spread myself too thin.
Yeah.
Um,
That makes sense.
yeah, so it's never 100% too late, but obviously there's a higher barrier to entry now than there was
Yeah.
before.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
right. So from FBA to running conferences and events, you're probably wondering, how do I make the jump? So I sold for several years, and then it was 2018, and then my wife and I got pregnant with our son. So previously I would fly out to conferences in Hong Kong, and at that time, my wife was expecting any day, so I was grounded, obviously. So I thought, rather than me being left out of what people are doing, teaching, why not invite these like 7-figure sellers to teach me and to teach everybody else online? So that's kind of the genesis behind the 7-figure seller summit, which I first started in 2018. Is really designed to help sellers like myself and a lot of other people watching. Over the years, we had like over 10,000 people that watched, that attended online. So that's how I made the jump to doing conferences. It was really to kind of scratch my own itch, basically.
Before we jump into the actual events, I just wanted to
Yeah.
ask, like, what were some of the most difficult situations you had in business, and how
Yeah.
did you overcome them?
Difficulties. We had like a little chat before the recording. You asked me how people perceive you as a Chinese American in China, right?
Yeah,
We talked a little bit on the personal side, but on the business side, when I attend trade shows, with like a Chinese face, a lot of the booth owners, they first think that I'm like a trading company, or I'm like a competitor.
Mm,
They don't think of me as a client first, right? Even if I'm representing my client, or even if I'm looking to buy for my own business, the first impression when they see another Chinese face is this guy's probably like a competitor. He's trying to like, spy on me, right? So I get like a lot of that type of like pushback. Like sometimes they don't even want to talk to you, right?
Yeah.
Which is kind of sad because they're kind of discriminating against
Their
our own
yeah,
people, which
exactly.
is but I'm not gonna get into that. But so what I did to get around that is whenever I go to a trade show first, I don't speak in Chinese. I
Yeah.
only speak in English.
Mm.
So when I only speak in English, they think, okay, this guy is, he's not like a competitor. Like he's probably a client like all those other like white people or black people or whatever, right? So after a while, then I say, I can speak Chinese, 就我可以讲中文. And then we started speaking Chinese, and then kind of already built some rapport or like 关系 in China, so to speak. So that's one way around it. So I would kind of like underplay my Chinese to try to get my foot in the door, and then I would do that in certain situations. You got to be like, I mean, in China, you got to be like, your mind has got to be like quick, right?
Yeah,
You
you
got
gotta
to think
be
of a way.
playing chess a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
So like even for me, it's like I would sometimes well, I always used to take my staff with me for factory visits.
Yeah.
Unless I was like familiar with the factory and the factory was like my sales rep spoke good English, but like I would always take them. But then I can speak Mandarin and I can understand, maybe not as good as everybody else, but enough where it's like if somebody's talking about something related to my project or me or whatever, I can understand that. But I would make it sound like I'm not, like I can't understand anything, something like that.
Yeah.
And then I would just want to hear what they're saying about me before,
yeah, I like that. Yeah,
you know what I mean?
a lot of times that happens. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of times, my Brazilian client is sitting right next to me, and then the factory would just like speak privately to me right in front of his face. It's like, oh, this Lao Wai, this, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Like, you tell him, blah blah blah. They'll just like assume you don't understand anything. So,
Exactly. So so it was always interesting in those situations. Like, oh, okay, so they in certain situations, if they're speaking to speaking about you, or your order in a negative way, like,
yes,
I'm not going to work with this factory.
Yes.
Like, that kind of thing. So like, it's a smart move to kind of make yourself seem stupid.
yeah. Sometimes you gotta, it's like the art of war, right? Sun Tzu, the art of war. Yeah,
exactly. So okay, so talk to me about the conference. I want to know what more details about the conference. How is it going to go? McLeany's going to be there.
Yeah, definitely. So this is the first ever, again, the first ever Amazon conference in Japan. Like, there's never even been one in Japanese. And then I feel, why did I create this? It's because Amazon Japan is the fourth biggest marketplace for Amazon in the world, right? But there's not too many people selling on Japan. So I think, it's almost like a real estate, opportunity. It's like one of the biggest, hottest properties in, maybe in town, but nobody's even looking at it. Right? Nobody's even talking about it. So I think it's really, it's like one of the secrets in Amazon selling is right under everyone's nose. Always talking about it. So I really wanted to create an event to help sellers. Like, let's say if you're a 7-figure seller, you're already selling in the US, or if you're already selling in Europe, Amazon, there's ways that you can move your listings into Japan. There's like certain advantages that you can get. So, that's the main thing. And then after I moved to Japan, I see Amazon is everywhere. I mean, you see like those Amazon boxes, and Amazon recently, they took over Rakuten. Amazon is the #1 biggest online market
so they
in Japan.
Rakuten?
No, they did not acquire Rakuten. They just beat Rakuten. Rakuten was like the #1 incumbent, but Amazon just took them over, meaning they jumped over them, right? Because Amazon has like the efficient logistics, they have the trust, the reputation, they have Prime here as well. They have in Tokyo, they have same-day delivery. They even deliver to like remote places like Okinawa, where I lived for 2.5 years, right? And then, so yeah, Amazon, when I moved
Do
When
you know
I
how they did that?
That's a really good question. I know that Amazon is more popular among younger people in Japan and also more males. Rakuten is the reverse. It's more older people and more female. But I think it's just like the delivery efficiency.
Mm,
Like, I mean, there's like prime same day delivery. Nobody can compete with that. One example is I was looking for a TV for my, we moved to a new Tokyo apartment and we moved there. I mean, basically there's just like one air conditioner on the wall and then the floors are all just like wooden and there's nothing there. So we had to buy everything. And, I went to an electronics store, like Big Camera, which is like the biggest one in Japan. I was trying to get a TV and I saw, I told them a model and then they said, oh, I'm sorry, we're out of stock. And then I just brought it up on Amazon. I'm like, hey, they have it on Amazon. It was like next day delivery. And then, what I asked him, like, I mean, does another location have it? I want it. He's like, he just told me like, kind of like a hush voice. He said, if I were you, I would just order it off of Amazon.
yeah.
They ship for free and, they're so fast and, we can't compete, right? Because
Yeah.
like those stores or like, they just don't have the supply chain efficiency. And Amazon's done this in, like dozens of countries all over the world, right? Like
Yeah,
they
they know
just
how
have that.
to insert themselves into the market.
Yeah, yeah. And Amazon actually has been in Japan for at least 10 years because one of the speakers at our conference, he's an 8-figure seller, Bernie Thompson. He's been selling in Japan for 10 years. So it's been here at least 10 years. They didn't just join recently, but that's the other surprising thing. 10 years here, there's still not many people selling. There's only, I mean, in the US, there's millions of sellers, right? But in Japan, there's only 173,000. So, I mean, it's just the level of the competition is a lot lower than everyone else. And then
And what's the population in Japan?
there's 126 million people in Japan,
Oh,
126 million. There's third biggest GDP in the world after US and China. A lot of people, forget that Japan's not a small country, right? It's the third biggest economy in the world. And I think the e-commerce penetration rate is about 73%. So many people use Amazon. I'm actually across the street from this like little auto repair shop, and I don't know if you can see like those boxes on the shelf. I see a little Amazon smiley face on the box right behind me.
Yeah.
You probably can't see that, but I mean, Amazon is everywhere. It's in like this, yeah.
So then the question, I guess, for somebody that's listening to this right now, what you mentioned the benefits, some of the benefits of attending the conference. If I'm selling in the US, yes, Japan is a big market. What is the difference between selling on Amazon US or Europe and like what are the things that I would have to change about my products and the way I do things?
There's a couple of myths that people think, like some misconceptions. Number one is you don't need to register a Japanese company to sell on Amazon Japan. You can use your foreign LLC. You don't need a Japanese business partner. You don't even necessarily need to know Japanese. Like for me, my Japanese is maybe at like a first grade level. I can't write a listing. I can't do the customer service, but there's ways around it. I mean, Amazon Seller Central in Japan it can be all in English. So if you're familiar with Amazon US or Europe, it's the same thing. And there's no VAT in Japan. So unlike Europe, where you have to go through all that bureaucracy and all that, cost, you don't have to do any of that for Japan. You can just come right in. But I'm not saying there's no challenges, right? Obviously, certain things you need to do differently. Number one is you need to translate your listings all into Japanese, right? Number two is you need to provide customer service in Japanese. Okay. There's also ways around that. I mean, I hired a part-time Japanese VA, a virtual assistant. So he was able to do the customer service, and anytime we had cases with Amazon, he was able to support on that. He was able to call them. So you can get VAs to do that. Another important difference is on the import side, and this is a big one. For anybody that wants to sell into Japan, to import into Japan, you have to have a importer of record that's located in Japan. Okay, this is one big difference. You cannot use like a US LLC or a Hong Kong company to ship into Japan and be the IOR. It has to be a company or like an individual with a Japanese address. So that's one big difference. Another big difference is in terms of the compliance. The compliance regulations in Japan are a little bit different from the US. There are certain categories that they pay more scrutiny to, supplements, cosmetics, medical products, anything that touches food or drink, those will be more closely scrutinized. So they will require more certification, and that could be more costly. So my advice is definitely to talk to an importer of record or IOR that's familiar with Japanese import laws and regulations, right? One example is one of the products that I'm selling is a kitchen product. I've sold in the US for a number of years. It's a 6-figure brand. I did the online research for Japan. I searched for it. I thought there was 0 competitors. I'm like, oh shoot, this is like a blue ocean opportunity, man. I want to jump right in. But fortunately, I spoke to the importer and they found out that the Japanese law actually only allows this kitchen product in professional kitchens, only in restaurants, not in private homes. It's actually like one of the components is illegal to be sold in Japan. So there's no market for this. So luckily I talked to the importer. So they advised me don't ship it in because you can't sell it, right? If I didn't do that, if I just like shipped it, it either would have been stuck at customs, confiscated, or if I got it to Amazon's warehouse, there's no way that I can sell it, right? So that would have been a nightmare trying to take it out. You know, I think everyone knows like the headache with that. So the moral of the story is you have to speak to an importer that is familiar with the regulations in Japan, the compliance testing. So then you can make sure that you can import safely. Check your product, check your HS codes, in other words, before you import into Japan. Those are a couple of the big differences off the top of my head.
And you mentioned you have a turnkey solution for this?
These pieces of the puzzle, right? The importing, the compliance, etc. I invited all of these experts to the conference. So they're going to be at the same place in the same room. So if you have a question about, importing into Japan, okay, talk to that guy over there. If you have a question about compliance, what do I need for compliance testing for my, for my kitchen product? Okay, talk to that lady over there, right? If I have a question about, translations, right, or PPC, okay, talk to that person over there. Everybody's in the same place at the same time. So it's going to be a mastermind. It's not going to be a huge event. There's only going to be around, I estimate, about 50 people. So you're going to, over the 2.5 days, you're going to have plenty of time to network, to ask questions, to learn more from, there's like 8-figure sellers coming, like Brandon Young, he's like one of the top sellers in the US, like, $35 million, gross revenue. He hasn't sold in Japan yet. So he's coming to learn. So, you'll be sitting alongside these people. And, it's like what you said. I mean, it's like what, Jim Rohn said, right? You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So this is going to be a great opportunity to surround yourself with other successful sellers from all over the world. And, these people, maybe they can become potential, accountability partners, or, maybe mastermind partners, or maybe just like, having another friend to bounce ideas off, in the e-commerce world. Cause it's, I don't know about you, but I don't know, like in my physical, like network of friends here, I don't have too many that are like in the whole e-commerce game, right? So yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell what I mean by the turnkey solution at the event.
I used to have that in China in terms of network people in the similar industry, but like not so much in the Philippines. But what is the name of the actual conference? And then can you give me like the link as well?
So the name of
link in the description as well.
Yeah, sorry, I should do a better job with the marketing. So the name of the conference is the 7-Figure Seller Japan Mastermind. It's going to be in Tokyo, April 4th to the 5th. And the website is 7figuresellerjapanmastermind.com. And it's an in-person event for 2 days.
Okay. And we'll link it up in the description, guys. Will you have any sort of content around this?
What do you mean?
As in, are you going to be recording any of the presentations or any?
I mean, my main focus now is making this in-person event the best it can be, because we'll have mastermind components during the event. So this way, you can sit down, you can ask questions. We're going to record all of the talks, all of the trainings, but we're not going to record, obviously, like the small group discussions, right? So we will have some recordings available afterwards for people that cannot attend.
I'm asking for the audience and for myself as well, because obviously I'm not going to be able to go. Like my birthday is a day before the conference starts.
Oh wow! Okay. I think Mike's birthday is around the same time. You guys have like close birthdays then.
Well, no.
Yeah,
Oh, Michelini. Yeah, me and
yeah,
Michelini.
Michelini. Yeah,
His birthday is like a day before or a day after mine. And
yeah,
we still for years we've been talking about doing a joint birthday party, but like it's never materialized. So yeah, my birthday's a day before, so it's a little bit there's some plans that I had
yeah.
here.
Okay.
But anyways, I definitely think it's something it's a fantastic idea. I think that there's a huge opportunity there, and that's why I was asking about the recordings, because I
Yeah,
would like to be able to watch and learn from whoever is doing the presentations and things like that.
yeah,
For the audience, I mean, it's obviously very relevant for my audience. A lot of my clients sell on Amazon. A lot of my audience is interested in selling on Amazon and expanding their Amazon businesses. So if Japan is an opportunity that hasn't been tapped into, I think it makes a lot of sense.
yeah. And one thing I forgot to mention, Rico, is Amazon is presenting at our event as well. They
Mhm.
have one executive flying all the way from Seattle to Tokyo to present. So I think that goes to show the importance of, number one, the Japan opportunity for Amazon. Number two, this is like a legit event. It's not just some event that some guy just threw together, right? If you look at the lineup of the speakers, many of these people are like, they've won awards. Ritu Java, for example, she won like the best speaker at BDSS recently. And then but some of these other speakers, they've never spoken before, like, the Japanese import of record. That's like, nobody knows of a legitimate Japanese import of record. I'm shocked. And this is like a huge company. So I think there's going to be a lot of, new information that we're going to unveil, because, for anyone that's coming into Japan now, it's still very early, like they're going to be like the first movers, but maybe next year, maybe in a couple of years, the market will be more saturated, right? So I think if you are interested, right now is the best time to go. I mean, the other thing is we're doing it right in the middle of the cherry blossom season. As you can see behind me, there's like, the cherry blossoms are in bloom now. So it literally is the best time of year to visit Japan. Many people just come to Japan just to see this, right? Just for
Mm.
tourism. And then we're also going to have a cherry blossom networking event in the evening of day one on April 4th. So we're going to a big park here in Tokyo. We're going to lay down some spreads with, Japanese sake, sushi.
Nice.
I don't think we can get Jiro sushi, but we'll have some pretty good sushi, and some networking with other sellers and the speakers. So we're really going to have a unique Japan experience you cannot get anywhere else in the world. And we're going to do like karaoke, and we got some surprises lined up as well. So
Nice.
everyone gets like a good, cultural experience as well, not just the business. And, for business owners, this is a business expense that you can potentially write off, right? Because you are attending a business conference. So, that airfare, the hotels, I know it, airfares are high, but at the same time, consider that it might be a write-off. Don't take this as tax advice, legal advice. I'm not an accountant, but from an entrepreneur perspective, it is pretty common knowledge. Anytime you attend a conference, it is a business expense. Hopefully this can help some people. So yeah, I mean, Amazon is coming. We have importers of record coming. We have compliance specialists, localization specialists, Amazon PPC for Japan. Basically, it's A to Z, right? Like all the connections you need, you're going to find here in the same place. I mean, that's the whole point, right? I mean, you don't have to try to find everything online. To be honest, like there isn't a lot of information online as of now to sell on Amazon Japan. So, I mean, if you really want to fast track this can take, I mean, you can cut like months off of the time it takes for you to get started. And, just building these connections, it could be even more valuable than the knowledge that you learn.
Mm. That's good. Why do you think it is that people have not like started selling on Amazon in Japan more? Like
Yeah,
what do you reason?
I know people are intimidated by the language barrier. Japanese is very different than, like even Spanish or, German, right? Because it's a totally different script. So that's one issue. Another issue is just, like the lack of information out there, and not too many people are talking about Japan. I mean, there's probably only one or two people talking about Japan, whereas there's more people talking about like Amazon UAE or Poland or Australia, and those markets are a lot smaller. And then I think the third thing is the locals in Japan culturally, they're not as risk averse as some other countries, right? So in Japan, one example is my Japanese virtual assistant. I met him actually at Uniqlo in Japan, in Okinawa. He spoke excellent English. He provided great customer service for my family. So I kept in touch with him. So I mean, he graduated college and he's working a full-time job in tech now, but he wants to venture out on his own to do like his side business. But he doesn't want to tell his parents because his parents are not really supportive of that. So it's like one example. The Japanese culture is like very conservative. Like people want like a stable job, and it's not really like a risk averse culture. Unlike China, like the joke is, everyone in Shenzhen selling on Amazon, even like the barbershop owner, even like the taxi driver. Right? Like here, it's not really, encouraged, so to speak. So I think that's another reason why there's not too many sellers. Yeah, I think those are the main reasons. But I mean, as entrepreneurs, if you look at it this way, right? These challenges are there, but when you overcome these challenges are like a barrier to entry against your competition, the people that are not willing to go over these challenges, right? It's like a moat around your business. So think about that, when you are considering, I mean, and entering Japan, it could be cheaper, it could be faster than launching a new product, because I forgot to mention this. If you're already selling in US, you have some success. Let's say your product is selling, you have, let's say like 600 reviews, right? One thing you can do is you can move those global reviews from Amazon.com to Amazon Japan. So that way, when you launch in Japan, you carry over the 600 reviews from day one. You don't start from zero, you start from 600.
Nice.
And then in Japan, the average review threshold is a lot lower, right? Remember, like there's only 173,000 sellers, right? So maybe in the US, those 600 reviews are like, the middle of the pack, right? But in Japan, maybe you're near the top of the pack, right? From day one. So you have the social proof, you have the trust, because Japanese online shoppers, they want to see a lot of reviews. So if you're already selling, you can bring those over, right? And then also the PPC costs in Japan are lower because there's less competitors bidding. So the average CPC cost in Japan was about 29 cents US per click, right? That's unheard of in the US right now, right? Maybe like 10 years ago, it was 29 cents, but in Japan, PPC costs are lower. So, and the third advantage is from the supply chain side. So Rico, I'm sure you're very aware of it. Just look at the map. Japan is a lot closer to China than the US, right? So if you're already getting your product manufactured in Japan, it only takes about 7 to 10 days by sea on a boat from Shanghai to Tokyo or to Osaka port, right? Compare that to US, it's going to take a month or even longer, right? And then it's going to be cheaper too, because the distance is closer, right? So the supply chain side, your deliveries are going to be faster from China to Japan and cheaper, right? So your landed cost is going to be less for the same product. It's probably going to be less. And then there's no trade war going on between China, Japan, like China, US, right? So you don't have the extra 25% Trump tariffs that you're still paying in the US. So your landed costs in Japan will be lower as well, right? So all of these factors, right? The lower PPC costs, like the greater number of reviews that you can get, the lower supply chain cost, the shipping cost, the faster shipping, you can place smaller orders, right? You don't have to hold so much inventory. You can get the replenish the shipments faster, right? These are all reasons why I think it makes sense if you're thinking about expanding your business rather than launching another SKU that could take like tens of thousands of dollars. Why not just invest in starting in Japan? Like the same, you already have the whole supply chain set, right? Just move a shipment into Japan and test the waters, right? So that's my advice for sellers if you're already selling and you want to grow your business in 2023.
Is there anything else that we didn't talk about that you wanted to touch on?
You mean in terms of business or in terms of what?
Anything. It could be business, could be life, but just sort of closing questions.
Yeah. yeah, my mission is to, I'm doing everything I can to help online sellers, e-commerce sellers all over the world. I believe that, we are making a positive contribution in the world. I work with I don't talk about this very much, but I work with a charity, an orphanage in Cambodia that I visited many years ago. There's about 33 kids in rural Cambodia that I help support. So a portion of the proceeds will benefit this charity as well, because in Cambodia, they have the lowest number, they have the fewest doctors per capita than anywhere in the world. So yeah, so the portion of the proceeds also benefit that. So I think everybody, we're all living our lives and our families, and we're going to do our best. So that's why I create these events, to help other entrepreneurs all over the world, and also, try to do some good as well. So yeah, that's it.
What is the smallest thing you've done that's brought you the most results in life or business?
The smallest thing I've done that brought the most results.
So yeah, the 80-20 principle.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's every week I do a weekly planner. I'll spend 1 hour of my time on the weekend to plan the next week, and then I'll review the past week. So that's kind of like the guiding principle for the next week. And then I'll review my projects. I'll look at what I want to be working on, in order of priority. So that helps me, because it's kind of like, it's like my boss giving me a sheet, what you should do the next day. If I don't do that, I'm kind of like a ship without like a rudder. I'm just like, flailing in the water. And sometimes I'm guilty of that, but I think that's the thing, like just planning the next week, because, we got so many things to do. It's crazy.
Can you name 3 podcasts, vlogs, or blogs that you would recommend to people? It doesn't have to be 3 of each. It can just be like 1 of each, or 3 podcasts or something like that.
Recently, I've been really getting it more into AI and ChatGPT. Reid Hoffman, he has a really good one. He was talking about ChatGPT. He actually had one podcast where he interviewed ChatGPT in its own voice. That was really interesting about, what sort of new careers there will be.
It's ironic that you mentioned that, because my girlfriend she's in the process of starting a candle business, and she just talked to ChatGPT last week.
Yeah, and I use ChatGPT as well to kind of aid some things. I think that's a big thing. Reid Hoffman had several good interviews on his podcast. I forgot the name of his podcast. I think it's like Green Lever or green something. Maybe someone can fact check that. And what else? I used to listen to Tim Ferriss a lot, but sometimes he gets he has really random people that I'm not really into. Tim Ferriss is a good one. And then I'm just pulling up my podcast app right now. Gray Matter is the Reid Hoffman one, and Mixergy, Startup Stories by Andrew Warner. That's one of my favorites. All this guy does is interview founders, startup founders. Those would be my 3.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, man, thanks for being on the pod, and I'm sure the conference is going to be fantastic, and we should connect more. We should do another podcast about some of the other things we couldn't explore as much,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of cool stuff you're doing, especially in the China sourcing world. Yeah, let me know if there's anything that I can do to help out, and I'd love to get you on a future session as well. I actually did a 7-figure sourcing summit last year, and I wish I knew you back then. So if we do that again, I'd love to get you on that as well to get some of your insights from the sourcing world.
Yeah, we might be on an 8-figure sourcing situation at that stage.
Wow, there you go.
I'm
there you go.
Playing around.
Yeah. Good
but
stuff, man.
But anyways, if people want to reach out to you, how do they reach out?
Yeah, they can email me, Gary at 8020sourcing.com. So that's spelled 8020sourcing.com. And my name is Gary, Gary.
And if you want to reach out to us, it's rico@sourcefinasia.com or podcast@sourcefinasia.com. Of course, the website, sourcefinasia.com/podcast, or contact us. Interesting point just about the 80/20 thing. When I was first starting to redesign the website and stuff like that, like I was looking at like other sourcing companies websites and then just kind of trying to see if there was any things that from a design perspective, from price perspective, comparing and seeing if I could spark any ideas. And 80/20 sourcing was one of the websites that I came across, and I took a few ideas from. I'm a little bit of a minimalist, so I liked the simplistic but modern nature of the site. So I took
Yeah.
that a little bit of that from you
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, we still have that content up. I create a lot of articles, sourcing best practices, trade shows. So yeah, if anyone's interested, feel free to check that out. And yeah, I'm glad that was helpful.
All right. Cheers, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rico. It's been awesome.